Hey, what's up guys, OSG here with a video that's a little bit different. On most of my lists and nearly all retro gaming lists online, we all talk about great arcade games that were ported to the home systems. Well, the other night I was watching Xyphoe, who is a great retro streamer on Twitch and Amstrad based on YouTube. Links to his channel are in the description. Anyway, he was playing a game on the Amstrad called Carlos Sainz World Rally Championship, and I thought, hold on, this is World Rally on arcade, which is one of my all-time favourite arcade games. But Carlos Sainz World Rally Championship was released earlier than the arcade, and this got me thinking how many other games were ported the other way around from home to arcade. So off I went and I found 8 games that completely flipped the narrative. So sit back, relax and watch 8 great games that started out on home systems but were so good they made it to the big time in the arcades. So let's kick it off with a game that inspired this video. Carlos Sainz World Rally Championship was released on Amstrad CPC, DOS and Spectrum in 1990 by Ziggurat and Arcadia Software. From the off you can see it's just World Rally on the arcade. Same great looks and control style, although I will say the controls are not for the faint-hearted. Fast forward to 1993 and the same development team as the home version were contracted by Galecore to make the game we now know as World Rally. This isn't actually credited as being a home to arcade part, but it's plain to see that the team took what they had done, souped up the graphics, brought some super realistic sound effects in and made the handling as tight as a kipper's arse. What we got was a game that will go down in history as one of the best isometric view arcade racing games of all time. Next up we're going all old school with a game that everyone knows as Boulder Dash. This was a game that most of us had on our home systems back in the 80s, and it was a real hit in the arcades too. But what many people won't know is it actually started life on the Atari 8-bit in 1984. This game was literally ported to everything and is on most systems, and on most systems is brilliant. 1 year after the original Atari port, Rockford made his way to the arcade, making it the first home computer game to be ported to the arcade. But this game in arcades was different. Instead of putting credits in for lives, you actually bought time with your money, making this truly original. The game itself isn't much different from the home port, but why would you change something that was so good in the first place? Pitfall II The Lost Caverns is next, and not only is this one of my favourite Atari 2600 games, but it also gives me a chance to say Activision bastards, even though it's from 1984 when they weren't that bad. Anyway, this game was a staple on most people's Ataris as you jumped and swam your way through enemy infested caves, and this game actually still plays as good as it did back then. Okay, so 1 year after the Pitfall sequel, Pitfall II The Lost Caverns was released on arcade, and it's more of a mashup of Pitfall and Pitfall II. But for the purpose of this video and the title, we will just pretend it's the same as the 2600 sequel, which really it is. They made everything look better, although it's a matter of taste, as I like the 2600 better. Added a catchy tune that sounds very much like Indiana Jones, and the main sprite looks like Indiana Jones. Not one I played in the arcades, but still pretty good. Right, let's talk about Lode Runner. This one started off on computers like Apple II and C64 back in 1983 and was proper clever. You had a little fella collecting gold and digging holes to trap guards, but the really good bit, it had a level editor, which back in 1983 was well ahead of its time. I then got hold of it for Japanese arcades in 84 and they didn't mess about. They added stuff like hanging from ladder edges, proper ninja stuff, and made the AI smarter than a university challenge contestant. All of the fun from the brilliant home version was included, but with enhanced graphics. Not a stickman in sight, this was as polished as a diamond. Next up we have Choplifter. This wasn't just any old Apple II game, this was the Apple II game back in 1982. Gordabund had us flying this rescue chopper, dodging tanks and jets while trying to save hostages. Simple stuff, but it was proper addictive. Then Sega comes along in 85 and thinks, you know what this game needs? It needs more boom. They basically cranked everything up to 11. Better graphics, more enemies, and enough explosions to make Michael Bay jealous. They took the brilliant home computer game and turned it into a proper arcade classic. And you know what? It worked brilliantly. He's one for proper retro heads. Cosmic Chasm from 1982 started its life on the Vectrex. You know, that vector graphics console that looked like a tiny telly? GCE developed it, then Cinematronics got their mitts on it for arcade, and it was actually the first home game to hit the arcades. Proper pioneering stuff. The arcade version swapped out the drilling vehicle for a spaceship with lasers, because everything's better with lasers, and they went all out with colour vector graphics. Even added a permanent map on the screen instead of just showing it between rounds. Sadly, it was Cinematronics' last colour vector game outing before they went bust, but what a way to go. Now, Spelunker might look basic, but don't let that fool you. It's harder than trying to eat a Sunday's dinner with chopsticks. It started out on the Atari 8-bit in 1983, then spread to C64, NES and MSX. The home versions were all about precise jumping and not running out of air. Proper frustrating stuff, but in a good way. The arcade version in 85 went, you know what this needs? Shooting and a bit of scuba diving. They kept all the cave exploring but added shooting and underwater bits. It had the same brutal difficulty though. This game would have had your paper round money faster than you could get the Sunday sport through a letterbox. Right. So let's finish off with maybe the best known game of all, and that's Tetris. So a lot of us will have thought that Tetris' first outing was on the Game Boy, as that's where we saw it first, but really it was created on an Electronica 60 in Russia, although not commercially. This is it here. Anyway, I'm not going to go too far into the story, as it's far too long and far too outrageous to believe, so go check out the Tetris film that was released a few years ago. Mind blown. Okay, so after all the lawsuits, backstabbings and backhanders, Atari secured the rights to the arcade version, and it was released 3 years after the original game in 1988, and it was quite different. It had 2-player and music, which by this time we expected to hear the Game Boy iconic Russian music. I was actually playing this version on arcade the other week, and it's still a great game, but the Game Boy version is definitely the definitive version. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope I've enlightened you to some of the classic games that we thought were arcade to home, but in fact were the total opposite. On that note, if you know of any games that flip the norm, let me know because it's something I'm genuinely interested in. Please remember to drop this video a like and subscribe to my channel for more great retro content. Oh, and if you would like to become a Patreon like these guys going up the screen right now, get on over to my Patreon channel where you can pledge for as little as $1. That will get you perks like your name in the end credits, video requests, giveaways and more in the future. Till next time, this is OSG signing out.